All right, guys, there's no turning back from here. Welcome to episode 6. Are we on 6 now? I know I haven't released 5 before while we're recording this, but welcome to the Connect Feature Gamers. This is me, Metasage, Venom, and we got for Snatchy here. Back with another one. How you guys feeling?
Good.
Yeah. So we're evolving here and moving forward on a lot of our ways around here. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you like in our videos, please don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below what you would like us to talk about. We're always up for new ideas, as we hope you'll be up for hearing us talk about it. But yeah, the first question I want to start us off with. And I am going with the more question style. We usually do like the news and what we're playing, and we can still talk about all those things. But we're trying to move more towards a topic based podcast. So here we go. This is our attempt. I'm really excited. So the first topic is gameplay versus technical excellence, and I'm sure I didn't phrase this correctly, but what I mean by technical excellence, I mean like the way a game looks, the way it runs versus the actual design of the gameplay loop in the game. And this came to light because, as we all know, Unreal 5 is on its way out, and I made a big whoop this year about it coming. I mean, a lot of the games that were supposed to be coming for this have been delayed, but recently, the game that touts the fact that it's on Unreal 5 and it's going to be free to play and it's coming soon, The First Descendants. We finally got some YouTubers that got early access and dropped some game footage, and we all had different reactions. So it brought us about to the whole topic of gameplay loops versus technical excellence, because obviously with Unreal 5 you're going to see better textures and more
Lighting.
unique items loaded, lighting. But it seems like that might bring some other issues that we hope to not see with these newer games coming out. So, Venom, I'm just going to start with you. I'm not sure, Greg, if
Mm.
you've seen this gameplay, but we'll start with Venom and get his initial thoughts and reaction from watching that and what his thoughts are on this topic.
Yeah. So I did see. I watched a couple of previews about First Descendants, and generally, while the game looked fine, it didn't really look like it had the legs that I would hope to see from a game before I jump in. There are other issues, but just sticking to the topic to start with, at least. I was put off by the lack of game modes. So we've got the whole gameplay loop versus technical excellence. We would hope that with more of the technical stuff taken care of by the engine, being able to produce assets becomes easier, duplicating assets becomes easier, lighting and everything becomes easier in development. We would think that more effort would be put into the gameplay loops and stuff. And according to the previews, it seemed like there was one mode. You would go around the map, you'd go to a node, turn it on, fight a bunch of enemies, and then kill them, head to the next node, hit a switch, bunch of enemies pop up, kill them, head to the next one. And I heard that was all that they did in the missions, in the level based missions, I should say. And then the other mode that they played was basically just one on one. Well, not one on one, but 4-on-1 versus a boss. And that isn't enough variety for me. They claim it was an early build, but at the same time, the game's meant to be 2 months away from release. So why we're getting an early build 2 months away from release is just kind of boggles my mind.
Right.
It being free to play also begs more questions. Like, does that mean that the initial budget on the game is small, and then as they monetize, they'll add stuff over time, I presume. But it's risky to start from such a low ebb.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. I had that same reaction. And the only thing is, I gave them a little grace with the game modes because even though I still have the same concern that we're seeing an early build and it's supposed to come out this year, which I'm assuming is this in December at this point. But I gave them the grace on the game modes because I figured maybe they just didn't let these guys play all of the game modes, right? And maybe there are set pieces in the story in the game because, you know, even free to play games like Warframe have set pieces and stories. So, and they had a trailer that seemed to display some kind of story or lore behind what's happening. So I gave them that grace. But then even going further, what I struggled with was the animations. What I saw was an amalgamation between Destiny 2, Outriders, and Anthem. And when I told that to one of my friends, he said, "Oh, should be a good game then." And I said, "No, no, 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 no. All the bad stuff from those games, like
Oh no.
in terms of like how bullets hit enemies, the way the health bars disappear, that's Anthem. And then you have the mini map, looks like it's ripped straight from Destiny 2. And then you have the way they move and kind of look, and kind of reminds me of Outriders. So the other thing is, nothing that I saw
Was
looked
new.
to be anything new that I haven't seen before. And you see him sniping enemies. Like the guy I watched was RX Gaming. You know, he's sniping enemies. Shout out to him. He's sniping enemies across the map. And with looter shooters, what's important to me is that there has to be some sort of back and forth. So for me, with games like Warframe, which is a looter shooter, the back and forth is you're kind of using your powers to stay alive. Like there's armor and things like that, because the hitboxes are kind of hard to like dodge. Then if you think about Outriders, they have a cover system. If you think about, let's say you want to talk about a game like Returnal, which is it isn't a different kind of game, but you can see all the bullets coming at you. So my question when I was watching this gameplay is like, because they were kind of melting all the enemies. So what is the loop of back and forth that you have with the enemies besides you shoot them and overwhelm them with damage? It just looked like a stat stick type of game. And so without me, like, just, I know we're using First Descendants as the example, but what immediately went to my head is, oh no, are games trying to just rush to be first to get something out using Unreal 5 as a clout chasing tool? Like, hey, we use Unreal 5. Come play our game. You know, we're the first to get out there. And it seems like there's this pressure. And of course there is, you know, hey, it makes sense. You can see it in YouTube. You can see it in a lot of business practices. You want to be the first out there, right? Especially if you have a new IP. So I get it, but it makes me worried that they're not focusing on the gameplay loop, which includes the game modes and new animations, because these are things you're going to be seeing. And what is the back and forth of you versus the game? What is the game? The game is you versus something. What does that back and forth look like? And when I'm watching this and I see them just shooting enemies and there's no, I mean, the powers looked okay. I mean, some of the powers even looked kind of shaky in terms of like the stability of the particle effects. And it just, as an Unreal 5 game, I just wasn't as impressed as I thought I would be. And maybe that's my fault for having my expectations too high. But I want to pass this to Greg. You know, Greg, from your experience, you know, what games have you played that kind of put technical excellence before the gameplay loop? Or what games do the opposite of that, put the gameplay loop above technical excellence? And what did you kind of expect from these new games going forward, considering what you've played?
Is it time to talk about Final Fantasy 13? Oh, good lord, that's the one. As soon as you said technical excellence, that's all I can think of. Final Fantasy 13.
Come closer to the microphone, please. I can't hear
Oh,
you
sorry,
really.
I'm just talking low. Yeah, the first thing I can think of is Final Fantasy 13. Like it's that game is just amazing looking, but it's almost nothing. But
I mean, what did they have in that game, and how did they sell it to you?
well,
Did they sell
they
it off the
sold
Final
it
Fantasy
to
name
me.
alone?
Pretty much they sold it to me because it was Final Fantasy, and it was $20. It was a couple years after it had come out, so it was wasn't that expensive at GameStop. So I just picked it up. But the main thing is that I also want to say this was my first. That was like one of my first PS3 games.
Mm-hmm.
So that generational jump right there was kind of crazy. So first off, the game kind of plays itself, and I see what they were going for. They're trying to they're trying to fix the JRPG curse where JRPGs take like 15 hours to get started because you have to kind of introduce all the systems in the world and all that stuff.
Yeah.
This one just kind of like put you right into the middle of it, and it looked amazing. For like 10 hours, I was like crazy into it, but after a while, it was like, okay, what am I really doing here? And I got to a boss that had like a whole jail HP. He beat me, and I had no urge to hit the replay button. Never finished it.
Right.
But God, the game was beautiful. And I think even today, like if you were to look up footage of that game, I think it's one of the better looking games I've ever played. They really
Mm.
went all out on this, just because there's the it's I feel like for at least a decade now we've been at the point of diminishing returns when it comes to these graphics. Like at a certain point, it's like it's not really so much that adding more power is going to get you.
Yeah.
It's more so into how the game is designed. Because that game looks good because they put their foot into it. There's lots of details in the in the models. The animations are good. It's like that's more power's not going to help that. You just have to do it good.
Style, isn't it? Art style and art direction.
Exactly. Like look how good the Wind Waker holds up today. It
Yeah.
still looks amazing. They put their foot in the design.
Mm.
Yeah. In contrast to that, there was another game that kind of debuted it with gameplay, which is Wild Hearts. And I felt the complete opposite about that game. Like the gameplay, like it showed actual back and forth between the user and the computer. It showed new animations. It looked great. I'm not even sure if that one's in Unreal Engine 5, but um, I think I had a completely different reaction to, and I'm kind of happy that this is happening because I'm a type person that has been so into technical advancements to a fault where it's like I've been so excited for Unreal Engine 5 to finally debut that I was ready to pick up First Descendants even if I didn't see any gameplay in advance. And it's free to play. I mean, I'm still going to probably play it, but at the end of the day, I was ready to be all in. And if anything, this has taught me to really be more careful about how things go because I did end up buying Anthem, and that was a disaster. Um, and I've purchased a lot of games over the last 5 years that didn't really pan out. We were just talking about Babylon Fall before we started the podcast. I tried that game out, and I'm glad I didn't buy that. But
Right.
there's a lot of games that get released, and they they don't meet the standard, or um, they tout some kind of technical advancement, and there's nothing really there. We talked about also a game that reminded me of this, No Man's Sky, when No Man's Sky first dropped. I mean, that game was touted to have, you know, procedurally generated worlds, and when it came out, it was just pretty empty. I mean, they've turned that game around since then. But it just kind of shocked me. I wanted to talk about that, just the importance of people really paying attention to the gameplay before they get into something or invest their time and or money. Because people, the whole thing, I think people are starting to get wiser to this now, but free to play is not a cop out for a game to be below standard, because often there's microtransactions involved, and often there's a huge grind involved, and your time is valuable. So just because something's free to play doesn't mean we can go, oh, it's all right, it's free to play. No, it's not an excuse. And that's probably one of the excuses they're using for this. Like, hey man, we're just gonna do what we can, not spin our wheels, get something out, and it'll be fine. It's free to play. I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be the next big innovation in gameplay. And we're using Unreal Engine 5, so it gives us time to practice. I can see that being the thinking for a First Descendants case. And from
question about that, sorry.
Yeah.
If Anthem had taken that approach, if Anthem was free to play, do you think it takes a different course? Do you think it gets more time?
That's a great
from the
question.
people and from the publishers?
Oh,
because they basically abandoned it, right? That was the other thing about it.
yeah.
It launched terribly, and then they were just like, "Yeah, we're not going to fix this, and we're not going to say a word." They just went quiet.
Man, it's so many things to consider. If it was free to play, would it have lowered the budget for it? That's one thing that comes to mind. But assuming it's the same game and it was just free to play, the same exact game. See, it's hard to say because I think it would, in order for it to be free to play, it would have to been more grindy. And there was one section in the game that was artificially grindy, and a lot of people quit at that point. And it was the first actual red flag when you're playing it, because people were like me. We played the game, and it actually had fun moments in the game, but you see all the technical bugs and things that went wrong, and you're just basically like, it's still good, it's still good. And then you get to that midpoint where they make you do this stupid artificial grind that takes way too long just to push the minutes, the time it takes you to beat the game. And and everybody just universally was like, yeah, there's nothing after this. We know that they're pushing this. Like, you can just feel it when you play the game, because the game comes to a crashing halt for no reason.
Right.
They basically, and I'm gonna tell you what it is. It's basically you're doing these missions, and then they say you have to collect these like tablets, or don't quote me, but something you have to collect in these temples, and you have to collect like all of them before the story will move forward. And in order to do that, you have to like complete these challenges that were just ridiculous. Like, let's just throw an arbitrary challenge, like you have to shoot 4,000 enemies. Like, it's just like stuff like that. Like, it's just, and there's nothing else in the game before this or after this that required that much grind.
Oh, just clarification here. What type of game is Anthem? It's like a looter shooter, or what is that?
It was a third-person shooter that had
it had
advanced movement.
It had gear.
Yeah.
So
you could fly in the game. You can fly. It had powers. It had mostly guns, and it was like mech suits.
It's like a PvP game?
No, it was a PvE game, and you were playing against you were fighting an alien enemy, and at the end, I think you fight like this big boss or whatever. And it only dropped one map, like, and it never did drop like the lore of the game. It was supposed to be like many other areas, and we never saw any of it because it just dropped the one first map, and it never expanded past that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so when you drop in the game, there's one map you fly around. That is the game. Like it'll be like in Monster Hunter we're playing right now, if they dropped the Ancient Forest, and then that was it.
Worst game ever.
And you know there's supposed to be other areas, but it just never
It
dropped.
just never came out with them.
Yeah, yeah. And in the ancient forest, you fight the Rathalos, the Azor Rathalos, and then the Betelgeuse, and then they're like, "That's the game." That was Anthem. And then throwing some fodder enemy along the way. And then to buy time after they were trying to make up for lost time, they like put in a hard mode of the same thing. So they just made it even. They just like turned up the HP and damage.
Nice. That's what you want in the game.
Yeah, so the gameplay was actually fun. It's just that's unacceptable for any game. And to answer your question, Venom, I don't think it gives it more time. I think it still stands. Like free to play doesn't help it. I think it still dies, even if you didn't pay money. I think it just makes it worse that we paid money. It just hurts more, but it still would have hurt. You know, and they would have made less money on it. They would have made a lot less money from that venture because people wouldn't have bought. The microtransactions were terrible. Like nobody wanted them. There was these skins that you could buy, but they were all terrible. I never bought one of them ever. Yeah, to make it even worse, they were supposed to come out with better gear. Like one of the slots didn't have like a legendary version, and they I heard they were supposed to come out with the legendary version. They never did. So when I look at the First Ascendants, it kind of reminds me of that. So it's also I've kind of been traumatized at this point in gaming. I think maybe the gaming community is kind of at this point where it's like, you know, we're getting kind of tired of microtransactions, of just games that don't meet a certain standard. It's getting harder. And I think a game like First Descendants, there's some distinction between like an indie game, a AA game, a AAA game. I think that transparency also has to do with it. Because if this First Descendants, if they said that, if they just came out and said we're an indie company and this is an indie game, I would look at it through a different lens. But the way this was presented to me screamed at least AA, right? I don't know if that's for you too, Venom.
Yeah, I think the trailer was. Do you know what? They might be a prisoner of their own trailer. I think the trailer looked really good.
Yeah.
And it might have oversold the game somewhat. Not that it doesn't look terrible. I'm watching more gameplay now, but it's maybe
it's to the
AA.
point. Well, I promise you, if you go and look at Anthem gameplay, and look at them shooting the enemies, and then look at the First Descendants, it's the same. I don't know what you call that, like UI or like. And I remember some people criticized that for Anthem. Like it's just it was a system that wasn't used before, or I've never seen that. And it seems like a nitpick, like the way the health bar goes down, but just when they're shooting the enemies, the way that the bullets connect and how the enemies go down seems cheapened to me. If that makes sense.
See, this is weird. So, I think, sorry, I'm just double checking this.
Yeah, so when you think about like having to do, if like in a shooting game, when you have to do that over and over again, it doesn't really lend to replayability. And also the boss fight, it was weird that it was in a room. I think that it will be out in the wild in the game when the game drops. I just would assume that. But yeah, I think RX did too. But when they're fighting this boss, I mean, I don't know if I saw one mechanic that looked interesting. Venom, did you catch
There
any?
is, there is. I'm watching some more gameplay now. There is this mechanic with this one boss where it's basically like the Eye of Sauron from Lord of the Rings, whereby when the boss can see you, it seems to put some kind of debuff or something, like an eye icon appears above the character's head when the boss can see you. So you're sort of dipping behind cover and then popping out to shoot it, and then when the eye turns to see you, you have to duck back behind cover, otherwise you get attacked and take damage. Which is, I don't think I've played a boss like that before.
I have.
At least it has a mechanic to it.
Yeah, you know, I've definitely played bosses like that, and I don't know. I don't know what I'm expecting, and maybe, you know, Greg, we were talking about this. People don't know what they want. I'm starting to feel in that way. Like, I think it's like, I don't know what I expected, but that wasn't it, and it feels unfair to place that on this game. But as we're going into this new era, you know,
I think hype is a monster. I think
yeah,
I think hype is an artificial monster that corporations have kind of, you know, developed, and it's not good because it creates just these unrealistic expectations, where it's like, you know, I don't know.
no, that's a
Like,
good point. Yeah, they have to sell the game, and they're definitely using Unreal to sell the game. Unreal 5, and, you know, coming off the fact that I think Warframe is a little long in the tooth, you know, and that's the other big free to play looter shooter. So the graphics are obviously upgraded, and I think there's gonna be a lot of Warframe players that are gonna jump to First Descendants. I mean, it's the natural progression to me. I mean, if you're used to playing Warframe free to play and you're looking for an upgrade, there really isn't any other choice other than Destiny 2, right? So I think that's going to be a natural progression, but I just don't think it's going to hold from what I've seen so far, and it is early. But again, it also, you know, this game kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, I know, Venom, you told me that they had, you know, code name before, and it was talked about for years now, supposedly. But the other thing is the fact that they say this is releasing this year. I mean, that's extremely close. It just seems very rushed. And I guess I'm also shocked because we've gone through a lot of games that have been ridiculed. And I'm just wondering when are developers or companies going to learn that this can't continue? And when are consumers going to actually stop feeling this?
Here's the thing. It can continue because people are still buying it and paying for it. Like, even like Diablo Immortals came out, everybody hated it so much, but it's making money. People are buying it. Like,
Yeah.
It's who's
And Greg, your mic is I don't know why, but I think it's super low. I'm not sure exactly, but
no, I haven't changed it.
okay, I'll see.
But it's what am I saying? If people are still buying it, is it really? Why would they stop? Just because people are complaining, that doesn't stop anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Complaints are funny.
Yeah, and I think
Go ahead.
I think what you often get is a vocal minority who complain.
Yeah.
While lots of people just get on with it. Like we have to put these kinds of things in perspective. It's important to actually know, like, the figures. It's important to know what goes into a game as well. You mentioned the budget. I'm actually looking at the developer for First Descendants, is Nexon, and looking through like the games that they've made. They've made a lot of mobile games.
Oh, Nexon. Yeah.
So
Okay.
and that's so that
Maple Story or something.
Maple Story, yeah.
Oof.
That's the dev of First Descendant. So it kind of puts things in perspective when you look at the caliber of the
Yeah. And Maple
of the
Story is the
developer.
first game that I've ever looked at like reviews of, and I've seen people with like 10,000 hours saying don't play the game. It's so crazy. I've played this game basically my whole life. Don't do it.
I 100% agree with that. I played Maple Story for a long time. Don't play it, please.
Yeah, so that doesn't give me any hope for First Descendants. But kind of touching, yeah, kind of touching on that. I think that there's also this whole thing on like consensus and vocal majority and minority that I think people are not understanding. Or I see a lot. Like I was listening to this one YouTuber today, and Venom. I watch a lot of like small. I try to watch small YouTubers if I find them, if they're recommended to me. And I saw this one guy. He said, "Oh, we did a survey, and 300 people responded. I think that's a good representation." And I was just like, 300 people representation of what people think, like so people don't understand what's a good sample size. Like even if you had like 40,000 people, it's still a minority most of the time.
Yeah.
We're talking about a game of double A or triple A magnitude. So to really get what people think or to get a majority consensus is sort of like takes a lot of work. So I try not to like generalize or get what everybody thinks, because it's just hard to find. But yeah, I think that's understanding that it's a vocal minority that's ever going to complain. It kind of puts it in perspective of how we get to this place where it seems to be continuing. Like I guess the news is that strap your seatbelts. We're still going to be dealing with for the foreseeable future, where you got to kind of have a head of discernment. Because the way I was thinking about it is Unreal 5 is going to free up the devs development time so much that all boats are going to rise, right? Like all boats rise. Like they won't, the floor will rise. The ceiling will go up, but also the floor will rise. And it seems like the floor is still in the same place. Just looks prettier.
Exactly. Yeah, it just looks better. And that's
honestly, I wouldn't
that's
look
where
at Legion as making things better. I would look at it as a way for the devs to cut costs. Like we won't see those, those innovations or whatever. It'll just be a means for, hey, we can do this in 2 months before it took 4.
Right.
that's a great point.
And maybe they're still good,
Yeah.
or maybe it'll just lead to more crunch time. Who knows how people use it?
Yeah. Awesome. So let's move to our second and final topic of tonight. We talked about this earlier, but let's give our full thoughts here. Because there's been a lot of talk about, let me kind of set why we're talking about this. There has been a lot of talk about MMOs dying, RPGs dying. Nothing's has staying power except for probably Genshin Impact. And the state of RPGs, the state of single player games, with Elden Ring coming in and everybody expressing, this is what we wanted, and then the revisionist history that I've seen personally from some YouTubers on Horizon Forbidden West being like, it's actually garbage. Sometimes I sit and think like, where do we see RPGs in terms of getting better? Like, what's the ceiling of what they can be? And sometimes I think about like the progression system of RPGs, because and it ties into difficulty, but RPGs give us rewards as we go along. Every time you level up, every time you kill a boss, you get gear. And the question really is, do we need that? Would a RPG, especially multiplayer RPGs, be better off if the way you progress through the game was mechanics based, in the sense that in order to progress, you have to learn the mechanics and get better personally at it.
So like Mario.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
old platformers, puzzle games where there's no gear or there's no level that will help you get past this part. Is this something that you guys think that would be able to push the genre forward?
Mm. Well, when you say
um,
genre forward, it's it's really hard to say things like that because of how big this
Or
hobby is.
develop a useful niche? Because I don't know how many games we have that are RPG fantasy experiences or RPG adventure experiences that rely on the mechanics rather than you can level up to kind of just beat the whole thing.
I mean,
Because
action RPGs are, out there,
I have a
but I think,
confession. I have a confession.
I mean,
This
I
is
think of
probably
Dark Souls
the first and last time I'll confess this.
was that.
Tales of Arise. I beat that
Hmm.
game on level and gear. I did not beat it with skill. There are things in Tales of Arise I still can't beat with skill. If I ran into it and I got past it by doing more damage before the mechanics could hurt me.
I mean, that's part of the game. It's an action RPG. So if the action part is kicking your ass, then you can go to the RPG part. It's part of the game.
But sometimes I wonder if I was forced to figure out that mechanic, and I'll tell you the specific one. There at the end of the game, there's this gauntlet of enemies you have to get past, and there's this one part where these two gigantic enemies, and they do a lot of damage. And when they hit you, they pretty much take like 75% of your health bar. And the way that I beat it was I leveled up the gun chick to the point where she could heal and do and push out damage and CC very, very easily and quickly. And I just spammed her until they died, basically. But
Then you got past the level.
part of me wanted to be the main character of the game and learn how to dodge all their mechanics and learn the damage windows and beat it straight up. But the other part of me was like, nah.
And see, I think that's the kind of duality that you kind of need because if the argument is should we just have it so that you can't level that character up and the game says no, you cannot beat this until you get good. That's not popular nowadays. And of course, when something good like Elden Ring comes out, that executes it successfully, all the people who really like that are like very, very vocal. Like, no, this is it. This is the best thing ever. Shut the fuck up. This is my time. But in reality, a lot of people are just like, well, yo, what the hell? I'm not doing this. Let me. And that's why microtransactions are kind of popular. You tell me I can just pay a couple bucks and level up. Cool. Let me just play the part of the game I enjoy. That's how people think about it. So it's like in a day and age like today, where they're trying to appeal to as many people as possible. I don't think anybody's gonna try and do that. Like gaining people off. If you're like from software and you like make that your niche, and you've been doing this type of game since 2007, and you finally get like a hit with Elden Ring, like a big hit, then cool. But I don't think any other developer is gonna try to do that. It's kind of I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah, and you say that, and maybe we'll get to the vocal minority part of this because being on the internet with a lot of these games, I feel like we keep going in these circles where it's like a game comes out, right? It's an RPG, new RPG. People play it, and they get to the point where they level to a point where they can pretty much one shot everything, and then they go, this is too easy. I need an end game. I need something to challenge me. And it's never an option to stop leveling or stop getting better gear.
Because that's counterpoint to the system.
Yeah.
You see, when you have a game where you have the option to level up and be as strong as you want, that's a power fantasy. People want to be as strong as possible. But when they want the strongest weapons, they want the highest level, they want everything. And it's kind of one thing that I think Final Fantasy kind of pioneered. They saw that and was like, "Yo, okay, we're gonna include a crazy ass boss that that nobody can hope to beat unless you done went and did everything."
Yeah.
And even then, you're still gonna have to master these mechanics. So, but at the same time, that's optional. They're never forcing anybody to fight Ultimate Weapon or or whoever. It's just send the game if you want it.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Actually, it'd be interesting to go back to the root of the RPG, in that sense, because you compare. That's really the difference between a game like Final Fantasy 1 and Zelda 1, right? It's the ability to level up, and then it was Final Fantasy 3 that introduced the job system, and I think those mechanics have been introduced to gaming because of, going back to the old topic, the gameplay loop. There is something inherently satisfying. Apologies. There's something inherently satisfying about gaining something, right? Gaining a level, getting a piece of gear, getting stronger, getting a new skill, getting a new ability.
I mean, people play RuneScape, and that's just, you click on a tree for 30 hours to get level 66 woodcutting. Yes. Now I can buy a bigger axe and cut a different tree in a different place.
Yeah. Same thing.
That progression, it powers the game. But the issue becomes, it's like, you have all these progressions.
But would it be refreshing for a company to go, okay, you have an axe, you can't get a better axe. Go cut these trees, and in order to cut each tree, you have to get the mini game right. And the mini game is not one of these easy mini games. And by the time you cut 200 trees, quickly because you mastered the mini game. Like, would that also be a high?
Honestly, I feel like we're kind of talking about Dark Souls a little bit. Like, Elden Ring kind of went a little crazy with all the crazy things you can do. But in Dark Souls, I feel like you can level up, sure. You can upgrade your armor, you can do everything you want. But if you don't play the game right, you're still going to get two-shot by a boss. It doesn't matter.
Right.
No, you can outlevel enemies in all of those games except for Sekiro.
Like, yeah, I know in Elden Ring, but even in Bloodborne, I feel like even if you're like level 200, if you don't know how to dodge, if you can never face tank a boss like you can in like, I think of any game. You level up enough and you get to the point where you just can face tank and heal. But I feel like the mechanics of Dark Souls stops that. It's like, at what level?
It can be done. It can be, if you have the right weapon and stuff like that. Like, there's other little mechanics involved.
But even like, that's the thing. Even finding those weapons involves like learning the system and learning the game. Like let's say you're not good enough to fight whatever boss. Like, you still have to learn the game to know, okay, I need to go here and find this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's never to the point where it's like, Like I think Don's talking about like grinding. Like you can never just like, okay, let me go fight slimes for 100 levels, and now I'm level 150, and now I'm throwing at the face tank. That's not gonna happen in Dark Souls. You're you need to figure out like, okay, this dude is doing all this fire damage. Let me go find some stuff that has huge fire resistance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but,
It's a little different.
yeah, but you're still. I know what you mean, but you're still using like over leveling. You can still use over leveling or
Oh no, for sure,
overpowered weapons to ease the experience.
for sure, for sure.
Right? You can't make it an easy game, but you can make it a much easier game than it would be if you just went through in a linear path, just full steam ahead sort of thing.
I think you guys. I think Don wants to return to like the original Castlevania, where it's like okay, it's like okay, this one path, this one level. You are this one guy with a whip, and you have this awkward jump arc, and if anything hits you, you're gonna fly back, and you gotta get to the end. And then there's nothing else you can do to there's no saving.
Yeah.
Like that type of game. While it has a charm, it's outdated. Gaming's too big nowadays. Nobody wants to play a game like that.
You know, I was thinking, and I'm glad we given our opinion on this, because I was thinking earlier today, which brought me to this topic. I was imagining, like, you know how you start, like Nier Automata. Did you play Nier Automata?
No.
Is that the one with the with the chick with the little dress on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Silver hair.
I played that one. Yep, that's the one.
So
embarrassing game to play, by the way.
Yeah, Nier Automata is great. I highly recommend it, Venom. If you, it's a really good game.
Yeah. It's one of those. It just kind of slipped through the cracks. I played all the good games around that time, and not that one.
Yeah, and Nier Replicant was also good. I beat both of them, but
I was wrong place, wrong time when I played that game. I was where was I? I was somewhere where there was a lot of people, and I was like, let me put this game on. And now I'm just sitting there around all these people playing this game. Where if I even so much as walk over a hump in the ground, her skirt flies up. It's like, it's like, what are you playing? I'm like, I don't know. Somebody said it was good.
Yeah, and really, that game, you know, that's one game that I never looked at my damage the entire game. Never did. I'm sure I got stronger. I did get stronger. But I wondered, that's a game that I could play, and it has Returnal. If you played Returnal more recently, it has like this bullet hell aspect to it that I really love, where you can see every attack come at you. Like the bullets are cartoonishly big, right? So you can dodge out of the way, and it gets crazy sometimes because you have like tons and tons of attacks coming at you, and you have to like physically dodge. It's like kind of like playing Tetris in a way, and I just enjoyed that kind of back and forth, because like a game like Warframe where like bullets are flying, but you can't really dodge. You just kind of use powers to kind of block damage or negate damage. This game, you can really focus on avoiding the damage because it's like another entity coming at you. And I was thinking to myself, when that game first started, I put it on hard, like the hardest difficulty, as I usually do. And I played the intro a total of like 60 times. I just kept dying in the beginning, like the entire time. And I'm not really a trial and error type person, so I was like, do I just suck? And I thought to myself, okay, hear me out. Because I thought to myself, somebody who doesn't have the reflexes to play this on the hardest difficulty or even on normal, you want them to have the ability to play this game because it's a really great story and great game. But instead of having easy, normal, and hard, you could have a default difficulty with RPG system, and have the toggle be the RPG system itself.
I don't know about that. I don't like that.
So that, I mean, but obviously the damage you do would be normalized so that it would take you a year to beat the boss because you're still doing 2 damage.
It's more than just the damage. There's a I don't think anybody would like opt out of a lack of control. Like, hey, I want less control of this. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And to have less control, it just seems backwards. It just seems like, okay, well, I want the hard difficulty means I have less control over what's going on. And if I want easy mode, now I can do all the cool RPG things. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just
Well, yeah, I was thinking of it in terms of the reason why I picked that game because it has a lot of mechanics to the fights, right? I don't know if you remember, but there's a lot, like each fight, there's a lot of things going on, right? In some of the more difficult fights, there's a lot going on. And so if each enemy took 7 hits to kill, right? Like it's no longer, oh, I just need a bigger sword and I can kill it in 1 hit. Or if I have like the level 1 sword, I can kill it in 10 hits, right?
Right.
Your sword kills the enemy in a certain number of hits, or even better, if you want to go more detailed, if you get critical shots, like there's a certain number of critical shots to certain critical areas that would end the fight sooner, right? If that was the mechanic and you can focus more on where you attack and avoiding all of those mechanics, then the game becomes more like when you go into those hubs and you're like, the first thing I do when I go in those hubs is, how do I get stronger? Let me upgrade my pod. Let me upgrade my sword. Let me get a new sword, whatever. You can still have new swords with skins, but it doesn't upgrade your stats. You just have a better looking sword, right? And
right.
I feel like if I didn't have this constant nag to get more levels, right, I would spend more time looking for lore, talking to different NPCs, moving on with the story, right? Because I know there's nothing I can get that's going to change my chances. I just have to get out there and face it. And so that's what I was thinking about earlier. And because honestly, this is just me. I've never heard anybody ever say this, but I hate when a game asks me to pick a difficulty. Like, I'm always going to pick the hardest one. Like, I love it when I jump in the game. That's one of the things I love about Elden Ring. You don't pick your difficulty. You just jump in the game. I want to play the game on the difficulty that challenges me. And that's different for every game. So it's like, I ask myself with Nier, like, is normal going to be hard for me or is hard going to be hard for me? I don't know. How do you know that? So sometimes you play a game on normal, or if you're used to playing every game on normal. Some games I put it on the hardest difficulty, and it's not even that hard. Like one game that I really do enjoy a lot. Venom, did you play Jedi Fallen Order?
No, yeah, it's on my backlog list.
Ooh, that
it's
game.
never top.
I don't know how other people feel about that game, but the hardest difficulty of that game to me was normal. And normal was easy. Like to me, there is no. And then, like when the game got an update, they added another difficulty level, I think, and they had like this challenge mode. I never played it, but when I originally played the game and I beat the game, it was challenging, but it wasn't like extreme challenging. It was challenging enough for me, and so I felt good because if I had played it on anything lower than that, I would have dumpstered the game, and I wouldn't have felt good because I don't like dumpstering a game, and because people know that I like power fantasy, right? But I don't like power fantasy for the sake of just I start the game and I'm just better than everything in there. I like power fantasy in the sense that if I obtain it, I earned it, and now I can use it. Like with Genshin, I started off Genshin, it was hard, and now I have that power and I can beat things. But I don't feel bored because I feel like I earned it. Like I already went through the gauntlet of challenge. Now I am strong and I can walk around in this kind of immersion that I earned my place in the world that they've created. And I would like there to be another layer where they say, oh, you thought you were strong, you're really weak, and then it makes me climb again. But at the same token, you know, I would like just a normalized challenge. And it gets back to the core of just my whole gaming theory, which is difficulty is like the most crux of all gaming. But it's like, I wondered that this morning. And I think Nier kind of, if I know you haven't played it yet, Venom, but it's one of those games that has a lot of mechanics to it. And the bosses are quite fast and quite aggressive. And I was just thinking, if the game does it really need the damage numbers? You know what I mean?
Mm.
And will these games, because Monster Hunter doesn't have a health bar, it does have damage numbers, but will games move more towards? Will there be games? Now I won't say games overall, but will there be games? Is it a fair idea to remove the health bar, remove the damage numbers, and go more towards, like, if there was a boss in the game and you struck him in a vital spot a couple times and it was very hard to strike him in that spot and you pulled it off, like, say, like, you have a thrust move and you thrust the enemy right in their heart, like, and that's an insta kill, but that is but it's not easy to do that. Like, that's something that is fresh to me, because it's, to me, games are never going to be realistic, but things that approximate realism create immersion, just approximating it. And I'm very interested that I've never seen this type of mechanic. And Venom, I would like to get your thoughts, because I know Sekiro for you came close to this. What was the difference between, like, playing a game like Sekiro and playing a game like, I don't know, pick some RPG where you have to level up? What was the difference in those two? I guess in I want to say happiness levels. What is it, endorphins, or what do they call it?
The difference with Sekiro is, although you can level up your strength to an extent, there is an item that you can pick up that makes you stronger. There's about 7 of them in the game, something like that, 7 or 8. But you can only pick up so many of those before you fight each major boss. So there is a cap on how strong you can be going into each of those fights. The thing you can farm for is like skills. There's different skill moves that you can use, but ultimately they're not gonna like be the difference between you beating a boss and not beating a boss. Essentially, it's either, regardless of what skills you have, is going to come down to your ability to fight that boss. So the skill cap is much higher than than any kind of benefit you can get from grinding. And because of that, if you're struggling with a boss, like you were saying with the Nier situation, you just have to learn the boss. You learn the enemy. You just go up against them and you learn their moves and you learn the mechanics. And eventually you start to learn how to play the game. And this is one thing that kind of divides the Souls community. I'm sure Greg knows. Sekiro makes you play Sekiro the way they want you to play Sekiro. It's not really a game where you go in and, oh, this is my style of play, and I can have a different style, or I can develop a second style and a third style, or a build, or a this or a that. No. Everyone plays Sekiro the same way because Sekiro wants you to play Sekiro this way.
Right.
But that way is beautiful.
Right. So how would you feel if the RPG system, the capped RPG system, had a toggle? And some people who, like, say, one of our friends who couldn't get past that system could uncap and beat the game in a different way by over leveling and gaining more powers that made a difference. Would it bother your experience?
That's not my experience. It's his experience. So why I care?
Yeah, that would be my opinion. That Do you know what? That's an interesting.
I think
I wouldn't care personally, just because I'm a consumer and my experience is my experience. But I think,
there's people would care.
yeah, I
if
mean,
you
obviously there
started
will
the
be people on
game,
the internet that care, but I think the bigger question is, would the developers care?
mm,
As long as people were playing it and buying it, they wouldn't care.
that's a good
Because,
question.
well,
Yeah.
you say that, but they make their games in a certain way, don't they? Like I'm saying, they made Sekiro this way, and it's very much a skill based game. They don't give you they give you multiple attachments to your arm or whatever, but they don't give you multiple weapons. You only have a sword to use.
Right.
You have supplementary abilities to that, which you can mix and match to your own personal preference. But ultimately, your main weapon is your sword, and the sword works the way the sword works from the
I feel like
first
that's just
enemy
how,
to the last.
because I remember there was an interview after he did Dark Souls 2 before Bloodborne, where he was kind of like he saw videos of how people were playing Dark Souls and it kind of made him mad. He was like, "Whoa, why are people playing like this? Why are people using shields? Why are people playing slow? That's not how I envision people playing this game." So when he made Bloodborne, and a lot of people were mad about this. He restricted, what you could do. He made it, there's no shields, there's
Yeah,
less weapons, and everything's more like, okay, if you want to play this game,
be more
you
aggressive.
you have to be more aggressive. And I feel like he just did again with Sekiro, even less so.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, went
even
more.
less weapons, even less everything. You just got a sword, and you
Yeah,
must pay. So
yeah,
it's like, I feel like when it comes to his spin-offs, he's just kind of like, this is what I want to do.
yeah,
But I don't necessarily think like for a game like Elden Ring, that'd be crazy. Like you know what I mean? That's
Yep.
this is the big game. So we're gonna try to please as many people as possible. Because
yeah.
I don't know if they necessarily meant for Sekiro to be the blockbuster in the way that Elden Ring was. It kind of seemed like let's let's get some practice. You know what I mean?
Do you
Yeah.
think they meant for Elden Ring to be a blockbuster?
I think they did. Yeah, they've been working on the game for a long time, and they got like Elden Ring. I think is the longest gap in between the games.
Yeah, it's the biggest. Like, I get that. Obviously, it's the biggest. I'm sure it had a slightly bigger budget and everything like that. Um, they attached the author's name to it and all of that stuff. The Game of
Yeah,
Thrones author. Um,
That would be a great question to
game,
ask the devs.
yeah,
What their
I
expectations were for that game.
yeah. I
maybe
don't
not.
know
Maybe
if they meant for it to be a
as big as it got, but it's
yeah,
crazy to say they didn't expect it. They didn't want it to sell because clearly, they've been adjusting these games. They clearly want more people to play them, or else they just fucking, we're not going to make it more accessible. We're just going to make it harder and harder. But that's not what they did. They're still trying to keep their vision, but it's clear they're trying to make the game more accessible to people.
Let me
what
ask
do you
you a
think makes it more accessible?
Then first of all, just the boss runs. Like that, they heard the complaints about the boss runs, and they're like, "Hey, we're not going to do that. Let's put
Okay,
a maiden statue in between the boss." You know what I mean?
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
So it's like it seems like it's punishing, but from as somebody who's been around since the beginning, they're definitely listening and adjusting. It's not
Well, let me ask you a
as
question, Greg. Let me ask you a question, Greg.
what's up.
In games that you've played, on the DS, on the Nintendo Switch or whatever RPGs, classic RPGs, was there ever a moment you got some sort of weapon or some sort of level up or ability that kind of dumpstered the game or made a certain level super easy? Did that deter you from finishing the game? Or how did you feel when that happened, if it ever happened?
I mean, I don't know. I can't. Nothing comes to mind that like a weapon that broke the game. I mean, I can't think of anything that comes to mind. But
And that's
I
interesting
mean,
as you say that because a lot of games that I play, I gain stuff that breaks the game.
but also I kind of feel like that goes back to how you play games. Like you said before, when you walk into a room, you immediately try to find the thing that makes you strongest. And I
Yes.
feel like
Yeah.
I just feel like I don't do that. I feel like I've never, tried to become super strong or break the game. But if you're trying to break the game, then chances are you just might.
True. True. Great. Good stuff. Good stuff, guys. Well, I'm gonna leave the floor open here. If you guys have any other topics you would like to throw in the pot, we can just discuss off the cuff. But those were two things I just kind of wanted to riff on a little bit. I think we definitely did them justice. Talked about RPG progression and
So while we're on the subject here, I said we should talk about what level of player responsibility comes into your own enjoyment in these types of games.
Great question.
Because I really feel like it's like you said before, Don. You could be playing a game and you could be getting your ass kicked 1,000 times, but you won't switch the mode to easy.
right.
It's like why is that? Like what is that? It's just like, and I feel like that's just one example, but if you look at almost any game or any genre, there's always some form of that. Like you look at Genshin, Spiral Blitz isn't hard enough. Well, did you try not leveling like crazy? Well, no, I want to level like crazy. Just make it harder. just like
Right.
just at a certain point, I just feel like
Because isn't it crazy that they won't stop leveling, but if they had the chance to turn the RPG system off, I wonder if they would press that button.
well,
Right? Because it's basically the same thing.
That would make the game boring. Because even me, right? I have no intention of trying to do a damage showcase or anything, but I do like leveling my characters. It's fun. So it's like, do I want to stop leveling my characters and to get more of a hit this enemy this way and you can kill them in one hit, but if you don't kill them this way, it takes 4 hits type system. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that it's a lot. Because there's a lot of ways to look at that question. That's a very good question. One thing that gets me is when people put a ton of hours into something and then say they didn't enjoy it. I've tried to look into that and
Maple
see.
Story, man, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
I can say this. I play a lot of Maple Story. Do not play that game. It's not fun. It just wastes your time.
Yeah. But the question is, like, at what threshold of hours into a game are you there because you found some enjoyment?
I think,
and that's where I struggle, because like this came up with Warframe. Like I played Warframe for about 1,200 hours altogether over like 3 years. And when I look back on my experience, like I had a lot of fun. In the end, did I leave on bad terms? Yes. But when I shit talk the game and then people ask me, hey man, do you enjoy it or do you think Warframe's a bad game? I don't. And I did enjoy it. And so that's me taking responsibility. That's what I think when I hear like taking responsibility for my enjoyment, is that I'm responding to what actually happened and not just responding to how I feel now.
well, a game like Warframe is a little different. I feel like that's a live service game, and the developers are constantly adding in stuff and developing stuff, and of course, as that road is being paved, they can take it left, they can take it right. So of course,
Oh, I think I lost you. I think I lost Greg. Did I lose everybody?
now, yeah. So somebody called me. I'm here.
Okay, no, good. Go ahead.
What was I saying?
They could take a right, they could take a left, and then eventually.
Right. Like, so if you have a live service game, they can go any direction they want.
Yeah.
Like imagine take Genshin a year back and imagine they just went completely in the combat direction. People would be feeling a little different.
Right.
So it's like, for a live service game, like yeah, you have to take some, you have to take control of your own, whatever. But they're also changing it, so it's a little bit of A, a little bit of B,
Yeah, but I also think of like if you get a bike, right?
right?
You get a bike, you can go take it and ride it down a fun hill, or you can just ride around your house and not really go anywhere or do anything. There's a level of like your creativity and your decision making on what you're going to do and how you're going to attack it that's going to lead to more fun. And I
Right.
think
Now,
especially with Genshin, like people say, "Oh,
here's,
it's
here's here's the issue with that though. So imagine you have a bike right now. This is just a regular bike. We're going to talk about a bike game, okay? So imagine you're developing a bike game, and you need to develop a biking experience, but you have two sets of people who are buying your game. One person thinks that just biking around is his neighborhood, like looking at the nature. Maybe he stops and takes a picture of a bird. That's an ideal biking experience. That's why I bought a bike. But the other person's like, fuck that. That's boring. I want to bike down a fucking mountain. And if I don't get that, this game's shit. So you have
right,
to make essentially two different games.
right,
That's what I'm saying. The bigger games get, the more this is going to be a thing.
yeah,
It's kind of like, it, the games, the budgets are getting so big. And you can't, if you were to make
Well,
a
maybe
game.
you should make a trailer where you're showing a guy riding down a mountain if there's no mountains in it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what First Descendants did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that's where I say, what does the developer think? Because the developer should make the game that they want to make, and then if people like, then the game then chooses its own audience.
Right.
Because I don't know. I was gonna go back to Elden Ring, but I think we talk about Elden Ring enough. Yeah, you should make the game you want to make, and then the game chooses its own audience. In terms of the players' responsibility for having fun in the game, I think it's important as a consumer to know what you like and be able to identify what you like and what you don't like, to identify red flags and things like that ahead of time. Dip actually asked me a week or two ago, like, have I ever bought a game and then just been disappointed by it?
Yeah.
And I don't think I have. Like, I'm someone who waits for reviews, and once reviews come out, then I make a decision on buying a game, or I'll just wait until way later and add something to my backlog if I hear that it's good after the fact. So I tend not to just jump into things, or I might have high expectations for a game, but it's normally like a sure thing. Like, God of War 2 isn't going to come out and be trash. It's just not going to happen. Right? The first game set a certain flaw. I know I'm going to like it, and I'm going to buy it.
That's how I ended up playing Final Fantasy 13.
That's funny. And
Can't be bad, can it?
Yeah, that's a great.
It's cool shit.
But then even
point.
once you get the game or whatever it is, and you're given options of playing in different ways, I know me. I know what I like, and I know the way I like to play things. So I tend not to make mistakes with that kind of thing. I think the only game where I might have actually made a mistake in hindsight is The Witcher 3, where I basically went for a melee type build.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the combat in that game is good enough to merit just a straight melee gameplay style. I did mess with some of the other magic abilities a little bit here and there to exploit weaknesses and stuff, but for the most part it was just put the right oil on my sword and chop some things up, and I don't think the sword combat in that game warrants it. and I probably would have had more fun if I led more into what makes that game unique, which is more of the like potions and the some of that kind of stuff. And I think going forwards,
they're coming out with a remake.
I think going forwards, that's one thing that I intend to do. So I'm always gonna ask myself, well, what can I do in this game that I can't do in other games?
Oh, that's a great point. With Witcher, I have just a side note. Did you max out the melee tree?
I don't think it's possible to in a single playthrough to max out the tree.
It is. There's a ability in there where if you hold down the button, he does like a combo. Did you get that one?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that another time. Because I actually went melee. I did all of them. Like I did the potions, I did the abilities, and I did melee because there's these things you can get to respec in the game. And I maxed out every single tree to see how it played, and I ended up landing on melee, and I thought it was like the most effective in the game. So I definitely want to talk about that further, especially because Witcher is coming out with a remake, and we're definitely going to touch on that game. But that's a great point that you made, though. Like I think when it comes down to, for me, is going back to knowing what you like, because to answer that question for me is hell yeah. I've been disappointed many a times, and it goes back to what you said in there is, what did this game offer that other games don't? I think for me, I've always been a person that haven't liked many things that games currently do. I'm always looking for something that, like in Warframe, the reason I first played Warframe, I thought it was trash, and when I came back to Warframe, I continued to play it because there was a character called Limbo that can jump between dimensions. And I don't know another game where you can jump between dimensions. And then you get to like a game like Genshin Impact that I play now. I saw characters that can create vortexes and drop rocks from the sky, and I just didn't know any other game that had that. So for me, I get caught up in the fact that I see something that a game has that I haven't played before, and sometimes it'll have that thing that I haven't played before, and then the rest of the game sucks. So I get like Anthem would be probably the biggest bait of all time. I mean, tell me another game that's open world that you can fly. And on that alone, I was like, there's no way this game could fail. And so when I saw the reviews, and then also for Anthem, the reviews weren't that bad until the game came out completely broken. And there was red flags around that, but I think some people are looking for, if you're not completely content with what the gameplay loops, and it's also a problem with me is that personally, there's a lot of things that I've missed in gaming that I never got used to. So like I didn't play a lot of the classic games, so a lot of those things are not embedded in me to try again, or I don't have these like nostalgic moments that other people have with certain things. So that reminds me of, like when I played Genshin, there was nothing about it that reminded me of Breath of the Wild, because I have never played a single Zelda game. So where people will say, "Oh, this reminds me of Zelda," in a good way or a bad way, that never came into play for me. So if you play another game and you like, oh, this platforming, this reminds me of this platformer game. There's a lot of platformer games I've never played. I've played Mario, but I've never played Mario myself. I've never owned a single Mario game. I've only played it at people's houses and stuff, like in passing. I've only played Sonic in passing. I've only played so my history with those things don't lend to that. And then the other thing being, we talked a lot about theme and things like that. So when you see a game that's supposed to push some things forward, I think those sometimes are the bait. But when you're really when you like you when you really hone in on what you like, and some you can assure yourself that that game has it, then yeah, I can see you would make less of those kinds of mistakes. And I think that for me personally, I don't think I've really have I don't think there's ever been a game that has everything that I like or has what I like. I think there's games that have pieces of what I want in the game. I don't think I've found the game yet.
Mm.
I don't think I've played it. Everything, I always look at it and go, maybe in the next one they'll capitalize on this part that I'm looking for specifically. I will say though that one game that really surprised me that I didn't expect was Batman Arkham Asylum.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly because we talked about this. I don't really like trial and error. We talked about this. And in Batman Arkham Asylum, the thing that really surprised me is that it had a system in which you could learn a fight within the fight without having to die, right? Not that that game was terribly hard at all, but I just felt like it made me feel like more immersed, because when you watch a Batman cartoon, he doesn't die. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I felt like I could approach things in a way because he had this thing where you could like dodge infinitely. I mean, there were certain red attacks you couldn't dodge, right? But that alone, just having that in the game, allowed me to have a different perspective. And so now I take that one aspect and I'm always looking for games to bring that in. And then you talk about Final Fantasy 14, where it has like the best, to me, like some of the best indicators combined with some of the best pacing of difficult fights, where it's like you're constantly being berated with like, oh, there's a red spot here. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to do this. And I say, okay, if we can take just those two things together, maybe we'll get the game that I'm looking for. But I can't say that there's a single game that I've ever bought that is exactly what I want. So that also, I think, leads me to being disappointed with some games because I'm always reaching. But if you kind of have played sort of like these elements that kind of make up what you want, knowing what you want, having seen it, I think that's what leads to that level of I'm not going to make these mistakes. And I don't know how many people feel that way, but it's definitely something that I look at in terms of Unreal 5 coming, because I think that a lot of people are getting their hopes up that we're hitting this new next big thing. We're searching for that utopia of a game. And I think Genshin was that for a lot of people. I don't think there's anything like Genshin. It has gacha attached to it, which is the greatest sin. But it's it's an open world game with addicting combat. And now I've noticed since that game has come out, there's all these games like Wuthering Waves, Blue Protocol. There's always a new IP coming in the future that's like Genshin, like they say, but Genshin didn't create this. This was created in our minds. Like we already knew this would be before it was even here. This anime open world game, we've all wanted it before we even seen it. So so to call it Genshin like is just giving Genshin credit for being the first one to do it. So yeah. I feel like I'm going to continually get duped into buying into games that I don't really that disappoint me, because the games that I'm looking at, I'm looking for it to reach this apex that hasn't been done before. If that makes any sense. My little soliloquy.
That's interesting.
Huh?
I can't say I'm there, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm always chasing this carrot that doesn't exist.
But I feel like you chase it because it doesn't exist,
Yeah,
and I think that's the danger.
yeah, it is.
Because you'll always be disappointed. Because even when it comes into existence, then it exists already, and you're chasing the next thing that doesn't exist.
Exactly. Exactly. Because it could always be propelled forward.
Yeah.
And Unreal 5 is supposed to unlock this new key of like unique assets and load and NPCs. And all I can think about is, okay, new levels of immersion. Now that, I think back to like Red Dead, which was one of the games. I know you played that, Venom, right?
No.
No?
Cowboys. Me.
Oh, yeah, right. So Red Dead had like a system where I don't like the movement in Red Dead at all, but it has this immersion where you can be riding your horse and a guy in front of you or a guy will pass you on his horse and he'll talk to you. He'll be like, "What are you doing around these parts?" And then you can like choose to rob him or something. And you create this whole side story that happens. There's this whole level of immersion. But even for Red Dead, I felt like there's a lot of gaps in between these random events, right?
Right.
And so when I hear more load can be put into the game, I'm thinking of a more populated world, not just with NPCs, but with events happening because you can put them in the game without having to load them. And I'm not a dev or anything, so it may sound retarded, but basically that's what I go to. It's like, okay, these worlds can be more filled, and you see the Unreal 5 demos where they have these incredibly dense worlds. It just speaks to the level of immersion and things that we can do. So now when you see something like Valkyrie Elysium drop, and it's like they drop you into a world, you fight monsters, and then you go back to the hub, and then you go to the next map and you fight monsters. It's automatically going to disappoint. If I had bought that game, I would have been disappointed, even though I can't say objectively it's a bad game, right? It's just my mind is already ahead of it, so I'm lamenting what I don't have. And I'm not sure how many people. I might be in the minority. That's the thing. I don't know if I'm in a minority. We talk about minority versus majority. I don't know if I'm in a minority on this, but I do know every time there's a new game that I'm looking forward to, there's this huge groundswell. Like you talk about Lost Ark. Lost Ark broke records. New World broke records. These are all games that I look forward to. So I feel like there is a huge audience craving the next innovation. New World, what was the innovation? It was supposed to be a more Dark Souls PvP like MMO. And I would say for PvP and MMOs, it is the best looking one, right? So there's PvP MMOs, but they usually look, I don't know if y'all have played them, but they usually look pretty jank and not very good. So they want New World was supposed to be some sort of like Dark Souls PvP, like all the movements in the game and the movesets were basic, so that it served a PvP purpose, right? Because if you add too much powers and things, it clutters the screen, like a game like BDO. I don't know if y'all ever played Black Desert Online, but PvP and Black Desert Online is very frenetic and expressive to the point where you can't really have like you can, but it's hard to have a serious PvP battle like that's stripped down and gets to the skill of it. Whereas the certain classes have advantages with AoEs and particles getting in your way and debuffs and CC, all these things that and so in New World limited your CC, limited your abilities and things. You still had them, but it was more like skill based, and that's what you know. Everything that I play is like there's a small sliver of what I'm looking for, but has any of these games ever combined them all? Will they ever combine them all? I don't know. It's just I'm always looking for it, and so I'm always kind of disappointed. And moving on to the next thing, and it's also part of the reason why I didn't really want to play single player games, because I feel like most single player games that I played followed the same. It's like the same formula. You're gonna play to this cutscene. There might be a quick time event, and then you play to the end and you beat it. There's no new innovations of like, oh, you can fly in this game, or you can drop a rock from the sky, or you can pick up this mountain, or you can like there's no some games you can't even swim in, or like it's like they don't try anything new. They just provide this thematic experience, which isn't bad objectively, but it's like how many of those experiences are you going to do over and over again before it all starts to blend together, and it unless you're really into that specific story, right? And so when I look at a game like God of War, I've never been into the story. So what makes that game, for me personally, like what makes that game stand out over Horizon Forbidden West? Like I like the story in Horizon better. They have different gameplay mechanics, but they're both going to push you to the next cutscene, and then you get to the end. I would say Horizon has much more mechanics that I enjoy, but I can't say God of War is bad, right? It's a great game, but you look at something like Genshin or Blue Protocol that's supposed to come out, and it's promising all these different things, and then the flip side of it is they know that they're going to have this fervor, so they tack on to these ideas, these grandiose ideas that offer these things that you've never played before in a game. They tack on microtransactions, gotcha, and these things. So I'm noticing that if I don't develop some sort of interest in these single player games, I'm going to be trapped forever in basically microtransaction hell, because the interest is with these grandiose promises that you'll be able to do these things, you'll be able to fly and do crazy magic, like Forspoken. Forspoken is a single player game, but doing that in an MMO aspect, like I couldn't imagine Forspoken in an MMO aspect. Like that would be insane. Like, but if it were, I wouldn't put it past it that it would be trapped in microtransaction hell, just because they already know out the gate that people, it's a wonder to it, it's a curiosity to it. Whereas I feel like the single player games is kind of a tried and true formula.
Sure. So what can all I can say to that is that I don't know what I want in a game necessarily. I'll say most of the games I've played that I really like are not necessarily something I thought I would have liked. Like, if you told me I would have liked Animal Crossing, why would I like Animal Crossing? What the fuck is that? But I love that game. I played the game a lot. Before I played Fire Emblem, I was not in RPGs. Never played a strategy game. Ended up loving it. I don't like open world games, but I play Genshin. So it's like, I feel like I try not to analyze too hard about, what's in the game, because you never know, you never know what you might end up liking, or what type of space you might be in to be able to even accept something that you might see in the past and was like, nah, but for some reason, right now you're in this space and you can accept it. So, it's hard to say.
Yeah,
Like, you know,
it goes back to even me playing Monster Hunter right now.
right? It's all in the experience.
Yeah, because I'm enjoying
So
that, and I hated that game when I first played it. Hated every aspect of it. So you're right about that.
and sometimes it just depends on how patient certain people are. Because even Demon Souls, like the Souls series is one of my favorite series, but I didn't like that series. I didn't like the game when I first played it. It was too hard. What the hell? I had to like, kind of throw my head against the wall for a week before I was like, oh, okay. But if I had just written it off, I would have never known. So who knows? I was like, I like to keep my head open, give
Yeah,
things a try.
but in general, what I'm asking both of you guys this question: what attracts you to a game, or what general things are you looking for first and foremost? Like, do you start saying by saying, because I remember when I found um, Genshin Impact before it came out, I had been looking specifically for an action RPG in an open world, and I would constantly go to Google and type in action RPGs. And at the time, there was only like BDO, Terra, Final Fantasy 14. Like there was a very short list, and I tried all those games. And then I kept searching that like every day until until Genshin Impact popped up on the list, and I applied for the beta. So for you guys, what I know you end up playing things that you didn't expect, but what do you kind of look for when you're looking for a new game as a general interest?
I think to a certain degree, theme and setting matters. Obviously, not on the gameplay loop side, but like I said, Red Dead Redemption doesn't appeal to me, and that's not a knock on the game necessarily or the mechanics of the game. Although there are mechanics in the game that I don't think I would enjoy, in terms of the movement and how slow I keep hearing that it is to play and to start.
Yep.
But yeah, that setting just doesn't appeal to me, right? If you took a lot of those mechanics and put them in a cyberpunk setting, or I don't know, put them in Japan, put them in China, put them in South America, put them in Africa, put them in another setting, there's a good chance that it would at least pique my interest, and I would take a second look at it. And then mechanic wise, I do like certain genres. So I like Metroidvanias. I like action RPGs. How much longer does that list get in terms of those are probably the two big ones for me. So is it in one of those two genres? Is it set in either of those places? And then what's the gameplay actually like? Does it look like I could have fun with it? What kind of weapons do they use? What's the combat like, etc., etc.? And what is that gameplay loop? And that's really it. I obviously do play things outside of those, but in terms of what appeals to me the most, what most of the games I'm interested in are like, those I think are the major areas.
How about you, Greg?
Well, I only like to play certain genres, so if it's not in the genre I like, I don't even look at it. Like shooter, if you're holding a gun, I don't really care. Not even a little bit. But like the thing is that the games that in the genre that I do like, I mean, I'm just, even if it's not great, I can probably still enjoy it. Like I will play a 6 out of 10 RPG. It's fun, you know what I mean? I'll enjoy it. I'll get through it.
Yeah.
But like if I'm playing like a shooter, it has to be the best. Like You got to tell me Halo or something.
Mm.
It can't be no, like Anthem or something. Or I don't even know the names of these shooters. Battlefield. I don't know. I'm not into it. But fighting games, I'll play it. Samurai Showdown, sure, give it to me. Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Action, let's go. Pokken, I played Pokken. What else? Metroidvanias I like. Now, it's funny, action RPGs, right? Now I would say, oh, 2 generations ago, sure. But that genre has become so inflated with terrible games that I don't even look for them anymore. It's just like, God, how many open world games has Ubisoft put out? It's just like you go to a tower, and then the tower shows you where to go next, and you go there, and it's just, I don't know.
What you say? Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed.
It's more than that. Far Cry became the same kind of formula. And then what was that game they put out last year?
The Division.
It was a Zelda like set in. It had like Greek gods and stuff in it. I can't remember the name.
Honestly, nowadays I'm kind of like, you played the series that you kind of been playing already.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'll play Zelda, sure. Mario, I'll play Fire Emblem. I'll play the staples you play if Miyazaki comes out with a game, because Sekiro, Elden Ring, Souls, whatever. I'll play that, sure. Monster Hunter, Street Fighter, I'm there. But if it's not that, then I'm probably not going to look at it unless somebody I know is like, hey, you should play this, and I'll give it a try. Or like I said, if it's in one of those genres, which is fighters, RPGs, and
yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah, because I think it also comes down to the way that I look for games too. Like I said, I Googled action RPGs almost every day, but also I used to constantly Google new games coming out this week, new games coming out, and in that way, I'm sifting through even genres I don't play, and sometimes I would see something. If it's hard for me to look at like a turn-based strategy game and see anything innovative. Like I ended up playing Persona 5 because people said it was innovating, but honestly when I first looked at the combat and people play it, I couldn't tell what was different about it. And when I played it, I can't say that I felt the turn-based combat was so different than every turn-based combat I've ever played. I just like the style and music, and I guess that's what it is. But
it's not necessarily the combat. That's the thing. It's all the systems combined together. It's not the fact that the combat is just combat. This is the thing about a lot of RPGs. People are really focused on combat when it comes to RPGs, and I feel like combat is not necessarily the selling point of an RPG. Like you ask an average RPG fan what his favorite game is, and the first thing they're gonna say is, "Oh, the combat's kind of dated." It's like Earthbound, right?
Yeah.
Earthbound is one of my favorite games, but I don't give a fuck about the combat in that game. It's literally a copy of the combat from Dragon Quest 1. Is
right?
There's nothing, but that's not why RPG players play RPGs.
Yeah.
So it's like I feel like a lot of people, especially the people who are always trying to fix RPGs, that's always where they start at. It's like nobody cares about the combat, bro.
Yeah.
It's not that nobody cares, but I feel like
that's not the draw.
It's not the draw. Yeah. You want we want a good world. We want a good stories. We want to be immersed. We want to we want to explore. We want to go and talk to every NPC and see what they have to say. That's that's why you're playing RPG, not the combat. The combat is second nature. When you're trying to fix something that's not broken.
And I would say that's why I ended up skipping a lot of them, because even though they have some of the best art surrounding the game, I was never able to perceive from like a trailer or gameplay short that I was looking at that like what was special about this RPG until we had our conversations and I started playing some of these old RPGs, and you find out some of those quirks about the world and immersion, you know. And one thing I'll say about RPGs and combat, sometimes you spend a lot of time in combat, and
Right.
it could be. It's like even if you try to look past the combat, it's like
You're going to be doing it
you're gonna be
anyway, so you
doing it.
can't necessarily
If it was quicker,
dismiss it. Yeah.
maybe, but
And that's why I think the best RPGs are the ones that kind of get to the point.
yeah,
That's why I think Chrono Trigger is so good, because the combat's there, and the combat is cool for what it is. But it's not like certain Final Fantasy games, 13, where you just are fighting monsters. Like, you know what the worst game for this is? Xenoblade.
yeah.
I cannot stand that game because that game does not respect your time. Like,
I've never played it, but I've heard good things about it.
Long as hell.
it's not even this long. I don't mind a long game. It's just between a game that's long and a game that doesn't respect your time. Because a long game to me, like, all right, I've played Dragon Quest VII, right? And Dragon Quest VII is, I think, I'm not sure if it's still considered the longest RPG, but I'm pretty sure it's still considered the longest RPG. It's very long. But despite this length, it's never to the point where you feel like, okay, this game is deliberately wasting my time, like Xenoblade does.
Mhm.
Like, Xenoblade is full of just like quests that go nowhere, and just like, and maybe it's just me. I think I just got bad luck. So first of all, Xenoblade has this like gotcha system for the rare blades, right? And the blades are.
Wait, do you spend money in Xenoblade?
Wait. You're talking about Xenoblade Chronicles X, right?
No, that's the one that's on the Wii U. That's kind of a spin-off. I'm talking about Xenoblade Chronicles 2 on the
Okay.
Switch.
I've only played the first one.
Is this gotcha in terms of microtransaction or just gotcha in terms
No.
of RG?
It's just in the game. Like, as you go through the game, you collect like these different crystals. There's like 4 different tiers. There's like regular crystals, and there's rare crystals, and there's super rare crystals, and they're you just find them when you play. And whenever you use them, there's a percentage chance to get certain rare blades. So to get all the blades, you would have to go and find all the rare crystals in the game and then crack them open. And I think the way it works is that if you get all of them, then it'll force you to get all of them, so you won't ever miss any. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as far as like I'm playing through the game and I'm just cracking open these blades, whichever one you get, those are the characters you're going to be using, or not necessarily the characters, but Xenoblade's weird. Half the characters are drivers, half the characters are blades, and the blades attached to the drivers, and it can affect what type of attacks the persons can do.
Mm-hmm.
But the blades some of them are story based, and some of them are just like you get them from the gacha, and there's elements and things. It's a whole thing. Anyway, I picked up my first rare blade from the gacha, and the way to level up this blade is literally you have to send her away to perform and sing and dance on these separate quests, and you can't use her while she's out doing this. And these quests take, I think, like 6 hours real time per quest.
Oh,
With her being out there, and then she has to come back. I was dumbstruck. I was like, this is ridiculous. And I think she's the worst one, but almost every character is like that. You just go out into the world and hit a rock 6 times, and every time before you hit a rock, her picture will pop up like, let's hit this rock, and then you hit the rock, and then the things fly out, and you have to run around and grab them, and it's so tedious. It's like a time waster. In the game, I actually switched the mode over to easy just so I can beat it, because the regular enemies in the game started to become bosses. And the bosses started to have like 4 and 5 different phases. And I'm sitting there just like, okay. And then you go online and complain about it. And of course, you complain about things online because the communities, they suck these games. So it's like, anybody think that the health towards the end is no, guy, you just gotta get good. Did you get all the red blades, or you level up this high? It's like, no, I didn't grind it. I didn't do all that. I didn't expect this jump. I don't know. I beat the game.
That's a good point.
I beat the game 7 out of 10. Not a bad game. Not a bad game. Not by any means, but did it disrespectful over your time.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot what I was talking about. I'm sorry. What even segued into that?
I think
just what you like in games.
Yeah, what you like. And I was talking about how I used to I haven't in a couple months, but I used to serve a different well, whatever's coming out that's new. And I think it is easier to see in action combat games like what you may like, or what there has been a lot of shitty action combat games. A lot of ones that also don't respect your time. And sometimes I would go to some of the staples like Destiny. I've tried Destiny. My friends will tell you that. Now I know you've played Destiny Venom. I've bought so many Destiny expansions and I don't end up playing the game. And I remember one time I bought a Destiny expansion and I was actually having fun, right? I was actually having fun. And I ended up trying to do this challenge for this gun, right? I'm sure you're probably familiar with this, Venom, doing challenges for guns. And for this one gun, I ended up in this one palace, underneath this palace, and there was like a couple switches, and you have to hit them in a certain like combination. So I'm looking around the room, trying to figure out like, how do I figure this out? And I couldn't do it. Like I was sitting there for hours, and I asked one of my friends, and he pointed me in a direction to another Destiny 2 expert that he knew, and he said, "Yeah, man, just look that up online." And I was like, "I don't want to look it up online. Like I want to figure it out. Like how do I figure this out? Like you don't have to tell me the solution, but like maybe point me in a direction of where you find the solution." And he was like, "It took the community to band together to figure out this solution to this puzzle." And I was like, "So you're telling me it's not possible for me to figure this out?" He was like, "Yeah, it's possible." I'm like, "If it took a community of people for months to figure this out, it's not reasonably possible for me to figure this out."
No.
He said, "Or you could just sit there and just do it by trial and error." I said, "Just like 7 switches. If you calculate the probability of how many times I have to like do this," I said, and it kind of ruined my experience, because just going to what Greg's saying, like games respecting your time. Like if you want something in a game, like it shouldn't take you. I agree with you on that, Greg. Like it like some of these challenges. Now it is cool that there's a community challenge, but I don't think a specific gun should be, or something that someone should get, or at least once the community has figured it out, make it a way that people can now get the gun in a reasonable way. That doesn't take a whole community to figure it out, because the community already did it. If you wanted to create a cool community goal, cool, I get that, but it's done. We already figured it out. So and just in general, I kind of despise when anytime I have to leave a game to figure something out. I've done
Destiny's in a lot of ways the worst for that, because the whole first game, there were so many lore points that you would find, and there was nowhere for you to actually read about the lore in the game. You literally had to go to a website to get all the information on the lore of the first game.
Oh my god, I don't know why devs do that. I really don't. but getting back to how I searched for games, I just sort of would look and see if there was anything stand out about the game. Like that's how recently I'm gonna get Marvel Midnight Suns, right? Like I don't play that type of game, but it looked like it was interesting in the sense that I've never played a game where it's strategy with like superheroes. And so that's the draw for me. It's always got to be some sort of thing I've never done before. Like, I'm always chasing this new freshness. Like, I don't want to do something I've already done. So it has to be something about it that's unique. And I think there is a danger in that, for our unique chasers. Like you could be shown something shiny and then you get it, and it's the rest. Like there's nothing to the whole game. So that's something that I constantly have to battle against, and why I end up playing some games that, like I probably the worst game I've ever been, the most disappointed I've ever been in the game. And I don't know if I can say most disappointed, but I was this game really hurt me. Biomutant. Now you
Right.
probably looked at Biomutant and went immediately like, no,
No, I didn't.
you
Not
didn't. Okay,
the RPG, the action RPG, right?
yeah,
With the animals.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I thought that looked like a promising game. They had Zelda influences and stuff.
yeah. There was, what I thought was, there was mounts, and you can create your own weapons amalgamations. There was area effects, right? Like you can be poisoned in certain areas, or like, and I just never played an open world game with all of those pieces, right? Where you can
Yeah,
make your own weird gun, and then I thought they'll be challenging, but I couldn't even get that far in the game because what I didn't pay attention to was how the voice acting was in the game.
right.
And I don't know if you remember the voice actor from that game, but
I'm sure I watched some. I've watched gameplay clips of it. I have. I don't remember, but I have. I definitely have.
like all the animals
But
are
you're
like,
playing as animals, right? So it's all
they're
yeah.
all
They
like
all sound
mumbling, and some of the animals mumble like I think there's one that sounded like Elvis Presley, or you know, and it was meant to be funny,
mm,
but to me it was like a tonal shift that I didn't expect. Like I expected a more mature game, but it came off as like a kid's game.
right,
I felt like I was playing like Toy Story
right.
or something like that, and I couldn't get past it. It just couldn't. I bought it and everything. I couldn't get past it. Never played it any further. To see all those other mechanics that I was looking forward to, like the crafting of the guns and weapons, unique weapons. And then the controls were kind of not as tight as I wanted it to be in the beginning of the game. I thought it would be like a fluid, more acrobatic, expressive game, you know. Um, and genuinely, I always looked for expressive combat, and people point to Devil May Cry, but I can never finish a Devil May Cry game. So I just don't know what it is about that game that doesn't accomplish that, even though it's a really expressive combat game. Um, I'm always trying to find these different pieces and put them together. So I always wonder, like for you, Venom, and for you, Greg, like you know, it what game kind of brought the most pieces together so far.
You gonna go first, Greg, or I'm game to jump in? Okay.
Oh, my bad. I muted myself. My bad.
Alright.
I was
Not
going to say
not
Dark
what's
Souls.
the best game, but like what had the most unique aspects of what you were looking for.
Unique aspects of what I'm looking for. I don't know about all that, but Dark Souls is perfect action RPG because I've always wanted the game that had an action side. Because every game kind of leads more towards one side. Either it's more of an RPG, and the combat doesn't matter as much, or it's more of an action game, and it's just you're gonna have a skill tree that's not really that impactful.
Yep.
But to me, Dark Souls sits right in the middle. It's perfect. It's just the perfect blend of action RPG. How unique is it? I don't know. I haven't played every single game, so unique. I don't know, but that
I would say it's unique enough that everybody keeps copying off of it.
yeah, yeah, it's unique for sure, but I don't know. I feel like uniqueness isn't necessarily, you know, more, execution to me is more important than necessarily uniqueness.
Mm,
Because if you look at uniqueness, Michael Jackson wasn't the first guy to moonwalk, but he damn sure killed it the best. So execution is more important than being the first to come up with something is cool, but it has to be executed right. Like even Pokemon, the whole monster capturing thing came from Dragon Quest 3. So this Pokemon was like, hey, that's a good idea. Let's polish it. Let's just make it a thing. And Pokemon is born. So would you say Pokemon is not unique because Dragon Quest did it first, or just praise Pokemon for its execution of the idea?
That's a good point. I think Pokemon did execute something early on, but I would say after a while, I would look for more further innovations. So yeah, somebody could innovate on that, like Temtem that just came out,
Right.
and you could say Temtem is unique in all these different ways, but how well did they execute that, right? So it's always different levels. Like Pokemon took it to a different level, and then after a while, it's like, okay, are you going to take it to the even next level? And even if you do take it to that next level, like Pokemon did come out with a open world game, but I don't think it was executed very well. And
It was okay.
and and then you
I
have
think you need to play it because it's exactly the type of game that you can kind of screenshot, and you screenshot a picture of a tree and like compare it to a Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time tree and be like, oh, Pokemon, the graphics isn't good enough. And it's like, I feel like that game really felt criticism to it. And I actually played it, and I was kind of surprised. So I think you should play that one before you know. Because I feel like a lot of anybody I've talked to that's actually played that new game is kind of like that.
yeah, I've watched someone beat it. And the reason why I didn't get it is one, I don't have a Switch, but two, I questioned getting it. I almost bought a Switch to play that game, Arceus, but Pokemon Arceus, but I expected when they went to open world, they would allow us to. What would be unique is if they would allow us to, when you throw out a Pokemon, you can actually fight with the Pokemon instead of turn-based. And that's another situation where, yeah, that would be unique because I don't think there's a game that's has pocket like catching monsters that allows you to do that. But would they execute it well? Probably not. It'd probably turn out like every other attempt to take something from turn-based to action RPG, and it probably like most of them don't execute it that well. Like because those developers probably aren't used to making animations like that. Or they would have to grow their team with somebody experienced in that when they've been experienced in turn-based that whole time. So that's the step that I've been looking forward to for Pokemon, because I would like to fight with a Pikachu instead of command him to do one attack at a time, personally. But if I'm going to play Pokemon Arceus and it's turn-based, I would rather just play like. Why would I just play Pokemon Red or Pokemon Blue?
Because it's not the same as Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue. I mean, just because it's still turn-based, it's not the same game at all.
Right, but what?
Yeah, the mechanics are different. And my thing with those games is just give us a 3D version of the regular Pokemon games. Why is that taking so long?
I think that's what they're doing. Like, actually, I think that comes out in a couple weeks, actually. Or next month.
The next one is that.
Yeah, the next one is pretty much. People were saying that Arceus was kind of like their,
It's like a spin-off.
It's a spin-off. They really wanted to really test out. Honestly, I feel like we should have a conversation about Pokemon on another pod because that's a whole thing. Pokemon is a whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, I really want to get into the contract because a lot of people don't understand what's going on with Game Freak, and they're like, how can this $1 billion company come out with this? Where's the disconnect here?
Yeah,
and I know the answer. I've researched this, and I feel like it's a lot for the end of the pod. So
okay,
next time, but they have a really fucked up contract, and it's not really fair for them.
Okay,
so it's like you look at them and say, "Oh, $1 billion company," but they don't have $1 million budget.
Right.
It's kind of like they're doing the best they can. So. Yeah. Sucks to be Game Freak.
For me, just to answer the question, I think Neo might be my favorite game in terms of how it's put together and the systems and things like that. You have really the Neo series, so Neo 2, I think it's better than the first game, but obviously it iterated on it. You have outstanding combat, a myriad of weapons, all of which are viable, right? Some people argue over some being better than others, but really and truly, they are all viable right the way through to endgame, from beginning to end as well. And then it has all of these systems, and it has a lot of systems. It takes maybe 6 or 7 missions probably to even reveal everything that's available to you. And then even then, when you finish New Game, they add new elements in New Game Plus, and every New Game Plus they add new elements to the game. So it's a really long, drawn out thing in terms of systems, but they all make sense. They all enhance the game, and they all sort of keep you on the hook, so that playing from New Game all the way through to New Game Plus, what is the top one? +4 or whatever. It feels like that is how you're supposed to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like you're meant to just stop after playing through the story.
Right.
Because of the way that they add things, the way that they build up, then keep iterating on the gear system. It really builds up to this crescendo at the end. And yeah, I think between the gear sets, the way that you earn currency by completing different missions, different tasks and things like that, the way that you spend different currencies or you can use your gear to earn money, you can use your gear to earn resources, and everything just seems to feed into itself nicely. There is elements of randomness that obviously keep you from completing your build too easily, but that keeps your carrot going. It gives you a reason to be doing the missions because you're essentially farming for or waiting for certain things to happen. And then you're enjoying actually playing the game while you're trying to farm and wait for these things to happen because of the combat, and the level design, and the setting. It's one of 2 games that I used to essentially win an argument with my mum about playing video games during the pandemic. I was out of work, and I played a lot of Neo 2, and I played a lot of Assassin's Creed Origins. But Assassin's Creed Origins led to me to having a very long and deep conversation with my mum about Egypt and the history of it and the culture of it, and etc., etc. There was a lot of things that I actually learned about Egypt through playing that game that I was then able to relate to her. And we ended up watching some documentaries around Egypt, and I was able to fill in a lot of blanks based on what I'd played in the game.
Right.
And then with Neo 2, there's a fair amount of Japanese mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also, that goes alongside Japanese history. So some of the characters are real people that fought real wars, etc., in that period of time. And then you marry that also with the mythology, which is actually Japanese mythology. Like there's certain things that they teach children. One of the enemies, I think it's a Nemahaj. Yeah, Nemahaj. Is they tell kids that if you don't do your homework, then a Nemahaj is going to come get you. Mm-hmm. And when you see this enemy in the thing, you're like, oh my god, like that is menacing. It has like chainsaws and stuff. Yeah. But that, you can literally go on Google, look it up, Nemahaj, and you can see that is an actual story that they tell kids or used to tell kids in Japan. it's all part of the culture. So it pulls together a lot of things that I find interesting and that are compelling to me.
Awesome. Those two really good games. Thank you guys for sharing that. You know, um, I think we will remember that going forward. You know, because it'd be interesting to see how those two games come back with a lot of the other topics. Because I've had a chance to play Neo too, and I definitely can see a lot of the points you bring up when we've talked about that game. And that's one game that I still don't know why I haven't played it more. Like I did play it a lot. Like I think I played it a lot, but I think when I played with you, I realized I was much further behind than I thought. I don't even know if I truly beat the game.
No, I don't think you had.
But I did play it a lot when it came out. Like I played that. I think maybe I have. I don't know. Don't quote me. Maybe I have like 40, 50 hours on it. Which I think is pretty decent, you know, like, and I played the beta also. I really enjoyed it. And one thing that I enjoyed that you mentioned about that, one thing that drew me to Neo was that when I played it in the beta, no matter what weapon I picked, I did feel like they were all viable. And, you know, balance is a really important thing to me. And I felt like I could take on whatever I felt I wanted to do instead of like, oh, this is the meta weapon that everyone needs to use.
Yeah.
And that was one thing I really enjoyed about Neo. And in terms of Dark Souls, I haven't played two or one or two or Demon Souls or Dark Souls 2. I tried Dark Souls 3. I enjoyed it. I just didn't finish it. But I could definitely see how that is like the perfect medium between action RPG, because the loop that it put me in was one where I felt like, in terms of games that have some sort of trial and error in it, if you choose to go forward without, you know, considering certain things, you learn things as you go along. And there's tons of lore in it that I didn't quite get. And I don't think even with Elden Ring, after I beat it, like it's so fragmented. And even when you feel like you learned all of it, I just don't know what to make of it. Like what I'm supposed to like think.
I think that's one of the beauties of it, though, because for years after I beat Dark Souls, you could get me into a conversation, and somebody else would have a different interpretation.
Right. Right.
That to me is just amazing. It's just like, yo, that's you thought about that? True.
Yeah, and we've definitely done that with Elden Ring. Like we've gone back and forth about things, but at the end of the day, I'm still unsure what I like. I think it takes more playthroughs to really genuinely get what you want to get out of it, and I think that's actually pretty good. That, you know, it feels like you need to go back and maybe go through some of those things again to kind of get a second look at it, because I feel like there's certain good movies, even though I don't rewatch or replay a lot of things. There's certain good movies I feel like I leave feeling like, oh, if I watch this a second or third time, I'm gonna get something different out of it. And I definitely feel that way about Elden Ring and Dark Souls in general. It's got a lot that you can miss just by going through it. But yeah, for me, it's interesting. Like I think the closest game I would say that had everything was The Witcher. We talked about this before, Venom. Like a lot of people that I talked to about this game, it's funny because on the internet it's like this legendary game, and I think it upheld Cyberpunk's hype. It started Cyberpunk's hype because they did such a good job on that game. People expected something from Cyberpunk, but I've yet to meet or talk to in person another Witcher 3 fan like I am with the game, and I find that to be quite interesting. Just like, where are these Witcher 3 fanatics hiding? Because you know, for me, I think it comes down to the thing I want the most, I think, and I don't know yet, is the ability to not have to go through trial and error. I despise it. Like, I really do. Like, I don't like dying over and over again. And it's not like I have a problem with dying. It's just more like after a certain amount of deaths, I'm going to feel like I'm wasting my time or I'm not good at it. And I'm going to want to move on to something that I can get better at. And with Witcher, the ability to block most things except for red attacks, and you can see the same thing play out with like Gotham Arkham Asylum. It allowed me to attack most of the enemies and figure things out without having to go through dying. And that's something I think is at the core of what I really want from a game, is the ability to go through it without having to die. But I do want the threat of dying, like, because I definitely did die in Witcher. You know, I may have fell off a cliff, I may have lost a battle, but I didn't feel like I ran into a situation and it just blindsided me. I felt like more like I just made a mistake, you know, rather than it's just overwhelming enemy that like I have to deal with. And not a lot of games do that. In addition to, like, you have games like Genshin that has bombastic, very expressive animations. I would like to see that combined with a Witcher game, but I don't think they ever will. Like, Witcher has powers, but they're not as flashy. So, you know, I think Witcher came the close, just having that that aspect of it, being in such an open and expansive world with tons of lore and choices in the way that you can go. I would probably agree, now that I've gone back and kind of played some of the missions over again, that the combat was definitely, I thought more highly of it than it probably is. But at the same time, it just still had that aspect that I could kind of, because sometimes in Witcher you'll go to a different island or something, or a different place, and you'll be surrounded by enemies, right? And you're sitting there going, oh my god, like, oh, there's too many enemies. Like, you know, I don't really have a way to deal with everyone. I'm not, and they're like, they might be higher level than you. But if you just stay calm and, like, you can kind of see what abilities they have or what they can do, if you've never fought this type of enemy before. And I really appreciate that aspect of a game. Like, you can actually figure it out instead of having to, like, die a ton of times in order to figure it out. And I genuinely like when I can figure something out myself without having to go to the internet or ask for help. And people say, oh, just don't be stupid. But I just feel like a lot of gamers have gotten used to, you know, it's what kind of has made YouTube kind of big in what it is now. Like, as soon as a game drops, there's tons of guides and stuff on how to do stuff. And we've kind of gotten used to this, like, play a game and, oh, I can't figure this out. There must be a guide somewhere, you know. And
Power picks.
that has sort of bothered me for a long time, even though I've used guides. But maybe that's more of a topic for another podcast where we can go into the, like, what YouTube is doing to our enjoyment. And that goes back to something we said earlier about, like, taking control of your own enjoyment. I've tried to take control of my own enjoyment by not going to YouTube as much as I can. And now when I go to YouTube, I've basically already figured something out, and I just want to see what other people think, not to take it, but just to see. Like with Spiral Abyss, I didn't use YouTube, and it was very, very painful for me in Genshin. But when I beat it, I went to YouTube and saw, after I beat it, like, how people was beating it. And it turns out that, like, I was doing a using the characters that most people weren't using, and also I was still using some of the same techniques. So it was funny to me how, like, people had the same techniques, but they were saying certain characters couldn't be used, but they were using the same techniques. that they were saying wouldn't work with this certain character. And I just felt good about that, because if I had just watched the videos, I would have just built the same characters that they told me to build, and I wouldn't have figured out that these other characters were indeed viable and seen it for myself. And that's what gives me a higher like feeling in a game, like, oh, okay, I feel a greater sense of accomplishment. And really what the basis of that for me is a game allowing me the space to learn stuff as I go along, instead of having this and I know that certain genres like the Dark Souls, when I decided to play Elden Ring, I just kind of threw that out the window, because I know this is not this type of game. Like, this whole genre, it wants you to really, I mean, there are certain ways, because there were certain things in Elden Ring where it's like you could do something to, like, I think there was a boss where if you found a certain item, it would make the fight way, way easier. So there's stuff like that in Elden Ring, but for the most part, I knew that excuse me, I knew that I would not be able to go about it that way, and that's just part of that genre being having that kind of mode.
Honestly, that's part of the reason why I don't like Elden Ring that much, because, like I always say, the original is better. It's just, that's part of the reason why. What you're describing, I swear to God, it's like the original Dark Souls. It's not as hard as Elden Ring. It's punishing if you don't pay attention, but there's a lot of crap in Elden Ring that's just inflated, like in terms of just raw hardness.
Yeah,
like everybody's harder. Like everybody has a move that's delayed. Everybody flies around and jumps, and but Dark Souls didn't have any of that. It was just like people lifted the sword up.
What really got me in Elden Ring was that fire worm. that was one of the ones that I don't see people talking about a lot. But like, I jump into a room and it's this fire worm that immediately like runs at you. I don't know if you've played that boss in Elden Ring yet.
Yeah. And it's like the original Dark Souls was not that hell. I promise you. It's like it's a lot slower. It's why I say, like, specifically Dark Souls is the epitome of the action RPG. The other ones afterwards went too far in the action direction and kind of left the RPG behind. That's why I keep saying Dark Souls. I'm not talking about Elden Ring at all. Like, I understand it's it came out like 15 years later. I think, you know what I mean. It's
yeah.
It's not the same. It's made by the same guy, and it's essentially the new Dark Souls, but it's a little different.
I feel
the devil's in the details.
Yeah. Good.
And, yeah. I think you should play.
Man, we covered a lot, gentlemen.
Oh, for sure.
I enjoyed that very much. I don't know if you guys felt that sense of relief explaining all that like I did, but good talk. I think we definitely laid out some things that I think people can think about in terms of like how they approach gaming, knowing that people have different perspectives and different ways of looking at it, and that people like me, like I'm going to, because of if you have certain focuses, you're going to have to accept that you're going to be disappointed more often than not if you keep looking for like certain unique aspects and chasing that new freshness, that new toy. But if you can focus down on, I think, what specifically appeals to you, and really lock that in, I think it makes for a better discovery process, for determining what games might appeal to you more, and you'll end up being less disappointed, I think. And that's something that I've been working on myself personally. That's why I'm being so open about it, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't be like this about it, because it's something I've had to learn over the last couple of years after going through the disappointment. Like, I'm a recovering Anthem purchaser, and I purchased the Legendary Edition, by the way. So
Was it legendary?
it was epic. It was epic. So I'm sharing this to hopefully people can see clearly, like this is what's happening. I think with some people, I don't know if it's like the majority of people or if I'm like just by myself, but like I think with the way you and Venom, you Venom and Greg, like way y'all go about it, I think have led to you having less disappointing inflection points. I think the way as we discuss games.
Well, I think I've been disappointed, but the time frame is different. You see, I've been jaded for years. I feel like you're just kind of becoming jaded, but I was jaded back when the PS3 was out.
I think I think I'm in trauma. I think I've experienced a lot of trauma, which I think it might be worse than jaded, just because it's like
I don't want to speak for Venom either, but I kind of feel like the reason that you even become like as discerning as you become is because you just know, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
You've been burnt, but it was a while ago. So now you're like, oh, not this time.
Yeah. And I think that brings it. I think that brings it home to like where we started, which is First Descendants, coming out, first Unreal 5 game, and I think that's why I felt so strongly to talk about it, because I was shocked. I'm not sure how shocked you were, Venom, but I was shocked at what I was looking at. It's like I was almost reliving that pain.
I think I would have been more shocked if you hadn't told me a few days before that it was free to play, because I didn't know it was free to play when I watched the trailer.
Yeah.
Free to play completely changes my expectations of a game.
Yeah. That's fair.
Here comes the battle pass.
Awesome. Well, guys, I think that covers the gamut for this episode. I appreciate you guys being here. Next week, we're going to continue this whole topic. I hope you guys enjoyed this format, talking about it this way. And for the listeners, if you have any suggestions, topics, ideas, please let us know in the comment sections below. Don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. This is The Connect, and we're signing off.
Peace.
All right.